Cunningham hints at WNBA Commissioner shakeup as she goes after Cathy Engelbert. I do feel like as a whole that could be a position that's maybe open at the end of the year. What are you talking about? That means the commissioner positions may be open at the end of the year. She added, Cathy Engelbert's done a lot of good things, but with where our league is trying to go, I feel like you just want someone who also wants that. That's up to the NBA Commissioner Adam Silver at the end of the day. Sophie Cunningham is calling out directly saying, Adam, at the end of the day, you're the top rat.
Usually, a commissioner's tenure ends quietly. A boardroom decision, an official announcement, and a statement that has been polished down to the last word. But the WNBA just got a very different kind of warning about Cathy Engelbert's future, and it came from a player who casually suggested that the commissioner's position could be open by the end of the year. That comment might have sounded like frustration on its own, until Patrick Bet-David pointed out the detail that changes the entire conversation. Engelbert's contract actually has a defined expiration date, meaning this isn't just hypothetical speculation. And with Adam Silver ultimately having a say in what comes next, a passing player comment suddenly looks a lot more significant than it did at first.
But Sophie Cunningham has decided, Cathy Engelbert is going to be a new target for her. And I mean, I'm not even going to say that I blame her here. I'm really not going to say that I blame her, because overall, when it comes down to it, Cathy Engelbert is despised. She is despised by these players, and they all want her gone. And it really doesn't really matter in these scenarios how good a job Cathy has done.
There's something almost bizarre about how Cathy Engelbert's position is suddenly being questioned. The biggest warning didn't come from WNBA executives, team owners, or some leaked internal document. It came from a player casually floating the idea that the commissioner's seat could soon be open.
Once I do agree with Sophie. Sophie Cunningham did another print profile piece, and she did it with USA Today, talking about a variety of topics about the future of the WNBA, and she's obviously put herself in the center of controversial topics before, but she had this to say about the commissioner role. Quote, you do have to have a person in power who is bold, who is confident, who wants the best for players, and maybe not for themselves all the time. I would like to see a change at commissioner, someone with a little more gravitas, someone who is willing to be at the center of controversy, to take some arrows for the players and for the league.
At first, that could easily be written off as nothing more than a frustrated player speaking her mind. But Patrick Bet-David focused on one detail that suddenly makes Sophie Cunningham's comment much more interesting. Cathy Engelbert's contract has a specific expiration date, which means there's an actual timeline behind the speculation. And once you connect that detail to Adam Silver's role in the league, Cunningham's words start sounding less like casual criticism and more like a clue that a major decision could already be approaching.
Somebody that can't come out and just make a ruling about what a woman is in Women's National Basketball Association eligibility guidelines. I mean, we can't define that? No, it seems we can't. Because the lame commissioner, lame duck commissioner, is too scared of the woke players and the coaches. I'm looking right at you, Cheryl Reeve, and that's
the chain of
Cheryl Reeves. And the whole chain of events began with something that sounded far more ordinary than a looming contract decision. Indiana Fever guard Sophie Cunningham sat down for an interview with USA Today, and at first, her comments came across as nothing more than the kind of measured diplomacy athletes use all the time.
Let's go! We need new leadership! Basically calling out the commissioner, saying we need somebody in there that's confident, and will fight for the players. She called her straight out and she said, maybe when this season's done, we'll have an opening there. And we need somebody in that position that's confident. Folks, why is this league so popular right now? Is it the play? Is it the exciting gameplay? No.
Cunningham said she wanted league leadership that was confident, aggressive, and truly centered on what helps the players instead of protecting the institution. Normally, that kind of criticism would be easy to brush aside as another athlete offering an opinion. But then she added a much more revealing thought, almost in passing.
the commissioner's position could be open by the end of the year. Cunningham immediately clarified that the decision was not hers to make, yet that disclaimer only made the comment more striking because she had just publicly raised the possibility that Cathy Engelbert might not remain in the role beyond the season. The key detail was that Cunningham wasn't simply talking about leadership in the abstract. She pointed toward the people who would actually have authority over Engelbert's future. That is where Patrick Bet-David's analysis becomes important. While many listeners treated Cunningham's words as another expression of frustration surrounding the league, Bet-David approached them differently. He treated the comment as a potential clue and focused on the question behind it. Why was Adam Silver so careful and non-committal when asked publicly about Engelbert's future?
Sorry, sweetheart, but you're going to get bad stuff said about you. You are. I'm sorry. You don't like it. I don't know. I get racist threats every day. Every day I get a racist threat. I don't sit here whine and moan about it. I fire back or I let it go. One of the two. No, it's amazing. That's your focus. That and the fact that, well, you all didn't watch us 30 years ago. You can't watch us now. It's the dumbest operation ever. How about you?
According to Patrick Bet-David, the picture becomes much clearer once you look at the actual terms surrounding Engelbert's position. Her contract as WNBA Commissioner is set to expire on December 31, 2026. So that deadline is not some internet theory, it is an established date. And with that in mind, Adam Silver's cautious public comments suddenly feel much more deliberate than evasive. When Silver spoke at the NBA Summer League event in July, he praised Engelbert's work in growing the league before saying discussions about its future would continue. That is about as close as corporate language gets to saying, "We're not ready to tell you yet." But that distinction is exactly what makes Bet-David's argument more interesting than a simple attack on Engelbert. He isn't claiming she has done a poor job or failed to move the league forward. His point is that expanding a league and maintaining the trust of its players are two different challenges. A commissioner can oversee new franchises, help secure major labor agreements, and still have players questioning whether leadership truly understands their concerns.
I'd be surprised if they actually let some biological men come on that court, because at least it would make it watchable.
She's like the Jordan of
the Jordan. I think it was Ari Spears. He said something like she looked like a baby giraffe trying to stand. Like, they can't even move. I think it's just all a play because it's unwatchable. But it's like the attention that they're trying to get is unbelievable. But I respect Sophie Cunningham because, Tom, what's the word that you said?
Authentic and fair.
And there's two words too. I'm going to add on top of that. Common.
That tension between league growth and player dissatisfaction sits at the heart of the entire controversy. And Sophie Cunningham was hardly the only player to raise questions about the direction of the WNBA. Minnesota Lynx star Napheesa Collier has also voiced frustration over how the league has handled its relationship with players and broader social issues during Cathy Engelbert's tenure. One player speaking out can easily be dismissed as a personality clash or a temporary disagreement. But when multiple prominent players raise similar concerns, it starts looking less like an isolated dispute and more like a deeper organizational problem. Just as important is who has largely stayed out of the conversation. Caitlin Clark remains the league's biggest commercial star by a significant margin, yet she has mostly avoided taking a strong public stance on this specific controversy. That isn't necessarily criticism of Clark. If anything, it shows how much weight even a relatively restrained comment from another player can carry.
Part of your job as commissioner is to deal with the players. You are the middleman between the players and the owners. And if the players hate your guts, and all you have done in this scenario is every single bit of a controversy, you've deleted your Twitter. She said the worst thing ever, that she was playing into the Magic and Bird rivalry between Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, which is the worst thing you can say. We all know they did it.
That conflict is happening alongside a much bigger debate over how the WNBA approaches questions of competitive eligibility, an issue where other major sports organizations have already taken clearer public positions. The WTA, International Olympic Committee, and various anti-doping bodies have each established policies or made public decisions, even when those choices remain controversial among fans. According to commentary from Patrick Bet-David and his co-hosts, the WNBA has spent significant time debating the issue internally,
without reaching the same level of public clarity. Whatever someone believes about the underlying question, refusing to clearly define a position can create its own political problem, because critics have more room to argue that league leadership is avoiding the issue rather than confronting it. And that only adds to the pressure surrounding Engelbert's leadership. The WNBA is no longer operating with the same financial stakes it had when the league was much smaller. This isn't simply about adjusting numbers on a spreadsheet anymore. More money, television exposure, sponsorship interest, and long-term business value are now tied to the decisions being made at the top.
This is what Cathy Engelbert addresses. And then the ladies, Chinny, Andrea Carter, whoever else, gets mad at people for continuing the conversation about that. Here is a suggestion. Those of you inside the WNBA, why don't you talk about the games? Why don't you talk about what's going on between the lines? You're the one spreading the hate. You're the one spreading the anger. You're the ones continually bringing...
Could have value long after her playing days are over. Most professional athletic careers can be surprisingly short, often lasting only a few years before injuries, roster changes, or other circumstances force players into their next chapter. That makes the decisions made during those limited seasons potentially important far beyond the court. Patrick Bet-David argued that Cunningham seems to recognize that reality, presenting herself not simply as a player focused on statistics, but as someone building a public profile that could eventually translate into a media career, similar to figures such as Riley Gaines or Sage Steele. And that observation shifts the conversation away from basketball itself and toward the bigger question waiting at the end of 2026. When Cathy Engelbert's contract expires, what will Adam Silver ultimately decide? Right now, there is no official announcement saying Engelbert has been removed, no confirmed replacement, and nothing publicly establishing that Silver has already made a final decision.
Statement by Sophie Cunningham is very, very clear. And by the way, what's even more clear is, Pat, you understand it as a leader, Adam Silver has been non-committal. And you know why he can be non-committal? You know what the expiration date on Engelbert's contract is?
Whose contract?
Cathy.
What?
December 31st, 2026. He doesn't have to say anything.
Got it.
He can let it roll out. Her contract's up at the end of the year. He doesn't have to get into a media firestorm. He can get to the end of the year. He can decide what they're going to do, put somebody else.
There's no confirmed decision yet, but there is a contract with a clear expiration date. There are more high-profile players openly expressing frustration. The league itself is bringing in more money than ever, and through all of it, the commissioner has chosen her words carefully, making sure not to publicly guarantee what happens next. That is the real issue being raised here. Bet-David was not claiming that Engelbert is definitely finished. His point was that the circumstances surrounding the situation have created legitimate uncertainty, and when that level of uncertainty exists around a business that has become dramatically more valuable in just 2 years, it is something worth watching closely. The important distinction is that nothing has been proven. A familiar commentator made an offhand observation, then connected it to a specific date hidden inside a contract most fans will probably never read. The league's top decision maker responded, but her answer was carefully worded and stopped short of confirming anything about the future. That doesn't establish what the final outcome will be. What it does show is that a potential pressure point is beginning to emerge behind the scenes. And in professional sports, pressure can only build for so long before it eventually demands a decision, whether the people in charge are ready to discuss it publicly or not.
A commissioner's probably not going to like this, although part of me believes Cathy Engelbert knows she's done. And that's why you haven't really seen a lot from her. I do have a theory there. Should she be out in the open talking about all the controversies? Yeah. Has she been? No. Which is a total fail, but I mean, there's no way they're going to hang on to her.
The biggest question in this situation may not even be whether Cathy Engelbert remains in her position beyond 2026, or whether someone else eventually takes over. What makes this story interesting is how Patrick Bet-David brought attention to the possibility without ever claiming that a firing was coming. Instead, he focused on details that most people appeared to overlook. There was one casual remark made during an interview. There was a specific date contained within a corporate contract. And then there was a carefully measured response from Adam Silver, the person with the authority to make the final call. Individually, those details might not mean much, but when they are viewed together, the situation begins to look different. What originally seemed like nothing more than one player's personal frustration can suddenly be seen as part of a much larger timeline. If Engelbert receives another term, it would represent a vote for stability and continuity. It would suggest that Silver believes the leadership that helped guide the league through its recent financial growth is also capable of handling the challenges that come with the WNBA's rapidly changing future. A decision to go in another direction would send a very different message. It could indicate that the league believes its growth has created new challenges, requiring a different approach and a different style of leadership.
Not fair that girls have to play against boys, and I'm here to tell you, it really ain't good for the kids. And our main focus was to hone in on little girls, protect the girls. And I got 100% agree with Sophie Cunningham in that aspect. Even certain people of the LGBTQ community has been siding with Sophie for as women being protected in women's sports. Could you imagine being a female and have to go to the locker room and there's a guy in the locker room? It doesn't matter if he calls himself trans. It doesn't matter if he see his...
That is why Cunningham's original comment carries more weight when viewed in retrospect. She never had the power to remove a commissioner, and she never pretended otherwise. What she did was bring a leadership question that might have remained behind closed doors into the public conversation. Then, Patrick Bet-David connected her remark to Engelbert's contract timeline and Adam Silver's carefully limited public response. At that point, the discussion became bigger than whether one player personally approved of the commissioner. It turned into a much broader question about leadership and succession at a crucial moment for the WNBA. The league now has more attention, momentum, and public interest to manage than it has had at almost any other point in its history. Cunningham created public pressure. Criticism from other players added more context. Engelbert's track record made the situation more complicated. The league's rapid growth raised the stakes, and Adam Silver's authority represented the final factor. Bet-David's contribution was connecting all of those pieces to a specific point on the calendar. In the end, he may have recognized the more important story before the rest of the conversation caught up. Before anyone can seriously speculate about who might take over the office next, the first decision belongs to Adam Silver. Should Cathy Engelbert be allowed to keep it?